we have a small group of other people who may join us. Jean and I each have a little thing to begin with. Are you going to tell your poem first? You want to start, Jean?
Well, I could. You know, the weather has been so weird lately, and the lightning and thunderstorms the other night were just, I just went upstairs to the loom room and I looked out at the sky and the lightning's going across the sky, and I'm going, whoa, it's like, ooh, like fireworks. Anyway, weather's been weird, so I thought I'd give you a little ditty about the weather.
Excellent.
Whether the weather be fine or whether the weather be not, whether the weather be cold or whether the weather be hot, we'll weather the weather, whatever the weather, whether we like it or not. Ta-da!
Hey.
Very nice. Okay, mine, I told us, I teach do a director Shakespeare reading group where we put on Shakespeare plays. We're just finishing Macbeth, and I was commenting on how it's full of these sounds in the darkness in the night. Their bell knocking at the door famously at the porter, and strange sounds in the night. And that put me in mind of one of the scariest things I ever actually experienced, which involves sounds in the night. My wife and children were visiting my mother-in-law, my wife's mother in Florida. So I was alone. And as I did in such times when I was alone, I slept on my wife's side of the bed, which was closest to the bathroom. She's always gotten the place of the bed closest to the bathroom wherever we've lived. So I was on her side of the bed when in the darkness, I heard somebody peeing in the upstairs toilet. And I sort of sat up in bed and say, I'm alone in the house. Who the heck is peeing? And the peeing finished, and the person, and it sounded like a man, started walking in the darkness. I could hear his footsteps falling as he came next to the bed and walked up right next to me and stood there looking over me. I was scared to death, but I thought, probably this is just a dream. If I reach out, I'll see no one's really there. So I reached out to touch him, and as I reached out, he grabbed my hand and held it really tight and squeezed my hand, and I woke up screaming, and he was gone. But it was such a frightening moment, and I thought about that a lot afterwards. Who was he? I decided it might have been my guardian angel, because he wasn't meaning me any harm. He was just looking over me. If instead of poking him, or when he grabbed my hand, I said, who are you? What do you want? Maybe he would have answered and told me something useful to know. But I got so frightened of this strange man standing next to my bed in the darkness, I woke up screaming and lost my chance to talk to my guardian angel. Okay, that's my story. It's a true story. Okay. Oh yeah, and we should ask when we have tellers to everyone mute, just in case you're going to make noise. You're going to burp or something, I guess. So Karen, do you want to start?
Sure.
Great.
Well, it's so much fun to be with you all tonight and kind of see your little faces in the background there. I haven't been telling stories for a long time. I've kind of had a story hiatus, but there was something about Linda's message that just spoke to me. So I thought I'll give it another shot. This weather, and by the way, I love storms. I will stay up all night if there's thunder and lightning, just so I can be a part of it. But my story really happened a few years ago, and it was during the end, summer was coming to an end. And all of my flowers in my flower garden were looking very weak or dying. The plants were turning to seed. It just was obviously the end of summer. Now, the only thing that wasn't dying or dead or going to seed was parsley. And I had planted parsley in the spring, and these parsley plants were 15 inches high. That was like they were like, I don't know, bushes at that point. And I had more than enough parsley for myself. And one day I was out looking at just clipping some parsley for dinner that night, and I noticed that there were little black dots all over the leaves. And I thought, well, that's probably because they're getting a fungus, it's into the summer, I don't know. But the next couple of days I went out and the little dots had turned to squiggly little worms. And I didn't think much about that. But a couple of days after that, the worms had turned to caterpillars. And there were literally hundreds of caterpillars all over my parsley. And they were eating that parsley so voraciously, they were like lawnmowers for the parsley. And you could almost hear them eating. But I didn't care because, my gosh, I had more than enough parsley for hundreds of caterpillars and my own needs. And I kind of enjoyed the caterpillars, and they kept eating the parsley. And then I thought, oh, I don't know. The only caterpillars I'd really come across before were in the East. And those were caterpillars that turned into gypsy moths. And gypsy moths can literally destroy hundreds, thousands of trees in a single season. So I kind of panicked, thinking, my God, what if these are going to destroy Northern California? I don't know. So I got onto the only source of wisdom that I know, Google. And Google quickly told me that not only were they not gypsy moths, but these were caterpillars that were going to become swallow-tailed butterflies. They were green, they were black, and they kind of had some green parts in them. And sure enough, they were called swallow-tailed butterflies. You probably all know them. I didn't. But their wings kind of end a little fillip, and that looks like the tail of a swallow. So I was very excited. And I looked at all these hundreds of caterpillars that were going to become beautiful butterflies. And I decided to change my life. I would become a butterfly farmer. I would have a huge butterfly farm. I would appear at garden clubs lecturing on butterflies. I would go to school and engage the children. Can anyone say metamorphosis? I would go to the farmer's market with my own little stall. Now, these were happy, happy thoughts for me. So I didn't have that much to do with that time, as you can imagine. But it didn't take long for me to discover that the population of caterpillars was beginning to diminish. But there were no longer the hundreds, and I began to realize there were not that hundreds anymore. So I began to be more mindful about going out and really studying, and I noticed that the glorious songbirds that I had been enjoying all summer were busily eating the caterpillars. Now, although I didn't like it very much, I've never been one to romanticize nature. In fact, I believe in the cycle of life. After all, I watched The Lion King twice. So I thought, I'll just let it go. There's probably enough parsley for the caterpillars, enough caterpillars for the birds. Nevertheless, I kept an eye on these caterpillars. And I went out one morning, and I swear there were only 12 caterpillars left. I said loudly to the clouds, "Damn you, Darwin." And I ran into the potting shed. I got some netting and I put it over the caterpillars, trying to save at least a dozen of them. And I was satisfied. I kind of sat back and relaxed. Well, the next morning I went out and there was one caterpillar left. I couldn't believe it. I ran into the house, into my bedroom closet, and I got a clear plastic shoebox. And I went out and I put the caterpillar in the shoebox and took him into the kitchen counter. Where else do you put a caterpillar? I don't know. Anyway, the kitchen counter made sense to me. And I put some parsley in there so he'd have something to eat. And he actually ate it. And a couple of days later, I went in and the caterpillar had crawled out of the box and was on the counter. So the only bit I know about caterpillars and butterflies was what I read on that Google article. But I decided that maybe he was getting ready to spin the chrysalis. So I fashioned, I got a wine bottle cork and some branches and some grass, kind of trying to make it look like his habitat. And I put it back into the box and put the caterpillar back into the box. And a couple of days later, it didn't take long, this caterpillar was spinning the chrysalis. So I felt very satisfied, but not quite sure what to do next. Well, the chrysalis at first was really pretty. It was a kind of a pretty color of green, yellow. And I thought it looks like it had so much life in it. And almost overnight, that chrysalis looked like a lump of clay, dried clay. It was hanging onto the branch. It was ugly as sin, and it looked really, really dead. So again, I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to throw it out because I wasn't really sure it was dead, but I didn't want to leave it on the kitchen counter. So I took it into the garage and put it on a shelf and just left it there. I didn't know what else to do. And it remained there all winter. I think it was about April when I went back out and I was cleaning some stuff off the shelves and kind of getting ready for the season. And I saw the box sitting on that shelf, and I took it down, and it looked exactly like it had looked when I put it together, when I put it up there the previous year. And so I took it down, and I didn't know whether it was dead or alive or what, but I thought, well, maybe this chrysalis needs to have some light. Maybe it needs sunshine, and maybe it needs the sound of nature. Maybe it needs, I don't know, classical music. So again, I put it on the kitchen counter, and I decided just to leave it there. And a few days after that, it really didn't take long at all, but I went in one morning, early in the morning, to get my morning cup of coffee. I looked in the box, and there was a butterfly trying to dry its wings. I was absolutely amazed, and it would kind of flutter and not do anything. And I looked up and I thought, my God, it's in the kitchen. If it starts flying, it's going to fly all over the house, and I don't know what's going to happen. So I knew that it needed to be outside, but I remembered the previous year when it was outside and these horrible birds were eating the caterpillars as fast as they could. Why wouldn't they eat a butterfly? So I sat down on the step. I took the box with me. I put it on the step. I sat down beside the step, and I just waited. I was going to protect this butterfly until its wings were dry and it could take off on its own. Well, I don't know whether you realized how long it takes to dry a set of wings. It takes a very long time. But eventually, the butterfly was standing up, and it fluttered its wings a couple of times, and it flew straight into the side of the plastic box, and it fell back. And it did it again. It flew into the box and fell back. And I thought, my God, after all we have been through together, you're going to commit suicide? I didn't know again what to do. So I very carefully put my hand on the side of the box and I tipped it on its side so that the butterfly would have lots of room to fly away. Well, as I put my hand down, the butterfly did not fly away. It climbed onto my hand and it crawled up my hand to my forearm. And without further ado, it flew away into the warm spring day. Thank you.
That was just fabulous. Yeah. It reminded me of once I was going to tell Eros and Psyche with a female storyteller, and I was preparing, as I do with such stories, trying to figure out the meaning, which helped me remember and how to tell the story. And I had known that the word psyche, which refers to our psyche, in Greek means butterfly. The word psyche means butterfly. And I couldn't understand why the psyche was like a butterfly. I thought, is it transformation and the chrysalis being reborn? And then I was outside and I saw a butterfly flying around. And I decided it was because of how a butterfly flies, not in a straight line. The psyche, like when you let it free, when you don't discipline it, it's like going to bed. It jumps from this subject to that subject, like a butterfly, here to there to here to there. It doesn't go in a straight line. And that's how I just guessed that why this word psyche also meant butterfly.
Fabulous. The tiger swallowtail butterfly is something I remember so well from my grandmother, my Nana, my mother's mother. And ever since she passed, which has been decades and decades ago, whenever I see a tiger swallowtail, I say, "Hi, Nana." I always think of my Nana when I see a tiger swallowtail. I love that story, Karen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to tell it to you.
Good story.
I had one parsley story, very short. This is Penn and Teller. You know the magicians Penn and Teller? When they were in the early days, they ate dinner together regularly because they're on the road together. And they evolved a game, like in a restaurant, sometimes you get a piece of parsley on your meal, on your plate. And nobody really eats it. So their game would be to try to put the parsley on the other person's plate, to, without them looking, distract them and get the parsley on their plate. And they did this for years, and they're both magicians, so they got very good at the game. And finally, one day they were in Las Vegas at some restaurant. When they were looking, there was parsley on one of their plates, and a truck came through the restaurant, crashing and knocking over tables, and they both just sat there looking at each other. They weren't going to look at the truck because they didn't want the parsley put on their plate.
I don't know if you know this, but my husband Raleigh was a Sierra Club trip leader, and he led a trip to Norway, and I was along as a guest. And we had hiked from hut to hut. Some were staffed, some we had to bring our own food. But toward the end of our trip, we crossed a glacier, and we saw that the lemmings don't leap off the glaciers. They just they die and they sink little, while they're still warm, they sink into the snow. We were on the glacier in the fog, and it was really hard going. So the hut that we ended up after that long, hard day was a staffed hut, a beautiful hotel, actually. And they served family style, this big platter of fresh caught ocean trout, which is like pink salmon, pink trout. It was so delicious. And it gets passed around the table and everyone gets their share. And towards the end, we were eyeing the Brussels sprouts and waiting for it to come around again to us so we could have Brussels. It's funny, you know, when you're in the mountains, you think you want a hamburger and a milkshake when you get out, but really what you want is a salad. So that day, those Brussels sprouts trumped the ocean trout.
Huh.
Greens, gotta love them.
Yes, I love Brussels sprouts.
Yeah. Terry and Ann, I see, joined us.
Yeah.
Do you have a story for us today, one or the other, or both of you?
Unmute yourself. Unmute.
Terry?
I'm unmuted.
Oh, good.
I'm unmuted. Let's see. I could tell a short story.
Good.
Hey, good.
This is an old time story about two people called Akbar and Birbal. Now, Akbar, I'm sure many of you know this. Akbar was this great king, and he was a Muslim. But he liked to think of himself as a very diversity-minded ruler. And so he was very good about picking advisors who were affiliated with other religions. And one of his most famous advisors was Birbal, who was a Hindu. And one day, Akbar's queen was walking through the palace in her beautiful gown, happened to brush against a beautiful vase that was sitting on a shelf. And when that happened, the vase shattered on the floor. She was horrified. She said, "Oh my goodness, I can't tell him what I did." She quickly picked up the shards, and Akbar walked into the room. So, oh, my lovely queen, it's such, wait a minute, something is amiss in this room. What happened to my favorite vase there? Oh, my king, a servant came to take it away to clean it. She lied. Except in the morning, the next morning, Akbar woke up feeling expansive and wonderful, and she finally girded up her courage and confessed. She said, "Oh, my noble one, I have to tell you that I lied about the vase. I actually accidentally broke it, and I was afraid to tell you." "Well, I will forgive you for breaking the vase. It was obviously a mistake, an accident. But I cannot forgive you for lying to me about it. So therefore, I banish you from the palace. You need to go back to Agra. Stay there until I think I want you back." Well, she was horrified. She pleaded and everything. No, he was adamant. So she went and picked up her things. But the very next morning, he called all of his advisors, all of his courtiers to him, and he said to all of them, "All right, now, you know I will not have liars in my palace, so I need to know who here has ever lied." Well, they all had heard about the queen, so of course they all said, "Oh, no, we've never lied, we've never lied." And into the room, and Birbal was asked the same question. He said, "Oh, your highness, well, you know, I've always tried very hard to always speak the truth and be honest and truthful in every transaction. But, you know, sometimes the situation is complicated, and sometimes just a little mistruth kind of smooths over things. You're telling me that you lied? Oh, well, never mind. I don't want to know anymore. You are exiled, no longer working in this palace." Well, he was upset, but he began to leave. And of course, word got to the queen. And the queen wrote Birbal a letter. And she invited Birbal to come and visit her because they seemed to have both suffered from a similar circumstance. And Birbal is leaving the palace, and he finally decides on a strategy. And he goes to the most famous jeweler in the city, and he asked the jeweler to come up for him to get him 12 perfect teeny tiny pearls. And when he got the pearls, he looks at them and he realizes they're perfect. They're size of seeds and they're all exactly the same. He goes back into the throne room to greet Akbar and he says, Your Majesty, I'm so sorry that I have, you see, I started on my exile and I met this peddler and he offered to, well, he was showing me these perfect pearls. And he says, actually, they're seeds. He says, if you sow these in a field, what will grow are these beautiful plants that when you harvest them, you'll have a whole harvest of pearls. Oh, really? Is that true, Burble? Well, that's it. Well, we certainly have got to try that. The next morning, everybody, of course, got the word. So everybody was there. And Akbar says, all right, Burble, here are the pearl seeds. You go throw them in the dirt and sow them. Oh, sire, I can't do it. I mean, I've already confessed to you that I lie, and I know that the precondition of sowing these is they can only be sowed by somebody who's never told a lie. But all your courtiers and servants here, I know none of them have ever lied. Well, they had heard about the queen and Burble, and they all mumbled together, and finally none of them would claim that they could do that. But Your Majesty, oh, the great Akbar, you are the one who has the most cherished the way of truth. You are the one who should be sowing them. Oh, well, Burble, you know, I have always been true to my word, and I have never, but you know, it's really hard to find someone who's never lied. In fact, I don't think we could find anyone in the whole world who has never, ever told a lie. And realizing what he had said, the great Akbar forgave the queen and Burble, and the queen made a majestic return to the palace.
Nice.
Nice.
Wow.
Well told.
Yeah. I love the theme. I taught writing for years at college composition. And my favorite assignment was to ask students to write a natural history of their lies, to classify the kind of lies they told.
Great idea.
Oh, it was a great assignment. It's so much fun to read. And I love the lies that you don't know, when you don't know you're telling lies, or when you're lying to yourself. That's when I like, I played sports my whole life. So if you're like play basketball against somebody who's better than you are, you lie to yourself that you're as good as they are. Mm-hmm. That motivates you and lets you play better because you think, I can cover that person. I can score on that, even though you know you can't. But it helps you do better to lie to yourself, to tell yourself you can do it. It's like motivation. And it was just so much fun to read because the students, they spent a whole week paying attention to when they lied, how they lied. They'd come up with huge, interesting categories and kinds of lies.
Great. Wow, that would be for some good reading.
Yeah, it was. That's was always my goal in giving an assignment, is that the students write something I'd be interested in reading. If you can come up with a good enough assignment, you can get stuff that it's not a bad job reading students writing.
Especially if it's coming from the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see Terry's joined us. Terry, hey Terry, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, sorry.
You have a story for us tonight?
Yeah, I got a few I'm trying to figure out.
Terry has always a story.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yay for Terry.
I told yesterday, I told 3 stories, and the first 2 are fairly, I mean, they're of significant length, and maybe I don't want to take up too much time so other people can get a chance to share. But I did tell this one, which comes from, that was written in 1918 and comes from a book of jokes by the Clancy brothers and the Dubliner Repertoire. And it's a letter from Paddy the bricklayer. Dear boss, I write this note today to tell you of me plight. And at this time of writing, I am not a pretty sight. My body is all black and blue, my face an ashen gray. And I hope you'll understand why Paddy's not at work today. While working on the 14th floor, some bricks I had to clear, and throw them down from such a height seemed like a bad idea. The foreman, he was none too pleased. Him being such a sod, he told me I had to carry them down the ladder in me hod. But carrying all them bricks by hand, it seemed so awful slow, so I hoisted up a barrel and secured the rope below. But in me haste to do the job, I was too blind to see that a barrel full of building blocks was much heavier than me. So I went down and untied the rope, and the barrel fell like lead, and hanging on to the rope, I started up instead. I shot up like a rocket, and to my surprise, I found that I met the bloody barrel halfway up on the way down, still clinging to the rope, though numbed and shocked from the almighty blow, when the barrel dumped out half its bricks some 14 floors below. Now when the bricks had tumbled from the barrel to the ground, I then outweighed the barrel and started down to the ground. I headed down and then I fell upon the floor, and I thought I'd seen the worst, but then the bottom of the barrel hit the pulley and the bottom burst. A rain of bricks rained down on me, and I hadn't got a hope. And when I became unconscious, I let go of the bloody rope. The barrel, now the heavier, it started down once more and landed right across me as I lay there on the floor. I broke some ribs in my left arm, and I can only say that I hope you'll understand why Paddy's not at work today. Sorry, I messed up a little bit, but.
Oh, I love it. I especially
that
love
was
it because for some years I was a hod carrier. I was a member of the International Hod Carriers Union in New York City. I didn't even know what I'd sometimes lay brick, but that was the name of the union. So I love hearing a story of a fellow hod carrier. I was in an Irish union.
Right.
And many a Paddy hod carrier.
Yes.
Fabulous.
Hmm?
And Martha, where's our Martha?
He was here.
Hey, Martha, you still with us?
I don't think.
Sugar?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, this is.
No.
I don't see her. Oh, oh.
Martha, come back, Martha.
Look forward to seeing her.
Yeah, me too.
Maybe she'll come back. Maybe she'll come back. And we have two Johns in the house. How about our second John? John, pronounce your last name for me, John.
Oh, John Copping. Is it me?
That's you. Would you like to practice your story tonight?
You know, if I can be here in the next month, I'll definitely have one prepared. I don't have one prepared tonight.
Fair enough.
Okay, no worries. That's good.
What about Jeannie?
What about Jeannie Elson? Always got a story.
Mhm.
Well, let's see. I haven't told a Korean story for a long time. Can I tell the Korean story?
Sure.
Absolutely.
South Korean story.
Well, you know, some smart aleck second graders would say, oh, I said from the north or from the south? I said, it's before it was separated.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
So this is a story that takes place a very long time ago. And there was a young couple lived in the country. They lived a simple life. They had a small piece of land. They had wonderful neighbors, and the neighbors helped out. They helped out their neighbors. And They lived simply, but they lived well. And then a terrible war broke out, and the young husband was called off to fight in the battle. It was a long time he fought, and he was one of the fortunate ones to come home. But he was a different person when he got home. He didn't joke and laugh and tease and tell jokes, help out around the farm. He was sullen and angry, never said a kind or pleasant or loving word. She tried everything she could think of to cheer him up, to bring him back to his normal, happy self. Nothing seemed to be working. But she heard that there was an herbalist that lived up in the mountain, and he knew how to make potions to cure anything. So she took a trip up to the hills, up into the mountain to see the herbalist, and she knocked gently and respectfully on the door. And when he opened it, he was a gruff old guy. He said, "What do you want?" She said, "Oh, I've come to ask for your help. You see, my husband went away to war, and when he came back, he's been so angry and so unhappy. Could you make a potion to cure him?" And he said, "Well, come back in 3 days. I'll think about it." She turned and returned to her home. And 3 days later, she went back to the hermit, who lived in a one-room house, little hut, and again asked if he could make a potion to cure her husband. And he said, "I could do that, but I need the key ingredient that you must provide." And she said, "I will do anything. I will do anything to cure my husband." And he said, "Well then, you must bring me the whisker of a living tiger." "You want me to do what? How do you expect me to?" And without any warning, he closed the door right in her face. He said, "If you want the potion, that's what you got to do." She walked back to her farm and was despondent. She thought, "It's impossible. There is no cure. I can't do that." But in the night, it came to her as in a dream. And the next morning, she went into the kitchen. She got a bowl of rice and put some meat on that bowl of rice, and she set out to the mountains on the other side of the valley. She climbed all day. Up and up she went until she came to a clearing and an opening to a cave. And she thought, that must be where a tiger lives. She put the bowl of rice and meat down on the ground and ran and hid behind a tree and held her breath and it didn't move. She was terrified. And then she heard the sound of rustling in the cave, and there she saw, as she peeked around the tree, the head of a tiger sniffing the air. And the tiger looked over at the tree where she was hiding, and she was panic-stricken. She held her breath, but she didn't run away. She stood her ground. The tiger crept up to that bowl of rice and meat and again looked at that tree where she was hiding. And then bent down and ate every grain of rice, every morsel of meat, and stretched like cats do after a good meal, and once again looked in the direction of that tree where that woman, terrified, was hiding, and then padded back into its cave. And when she knew it was safe, when she felt that the tiger was not going to be coming back out of the cave anytime soon, she ran and picked up that bowl and she went home. She did this every day for weeks. Each day, moving that bowl closer and closer and closer to the entrance to the cave, until one day she set it down right at the entrance to the cave, And she didn't run and hide behind that tree. She stood there. And she could hear stirring in the cave. She could feel the earth moving with those tigers' heavy paws coming to the entrance to the cave. She could feel the air being pushed out of the cave. She could smell the tiger's breath. But she stood there, and the tiger came out of the cave and walked around in front of her and stood down and looked her in the eye. She said, "Uncle Tiger, I have come to ask you a favor. You see, my husband went away to war, and when he came back, he was a changed person. He was angry, and I tried everything to cheer him up, to make him happy again, and nothing worked. So you see, this hermit, this guy that makes herbs to cure anything, said if I were to bring him a tiger's whisker, a whisker from a living tiger, he could make a potion to cure my husband. And that's why I'm here, Uncle." And then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a very small pair of sewing scissors and put her hand on the tiger's head and down to its cheek and took one whisker and snipped it carefully. She put her hand on the tiger's head once more and said, "Uncle Tiger, I thank you more than I can say." Now with that, the tiger bent down and ate all the food, ate every morsel, every grain of rice, every morsel of meat, and stood up and looked her in the eye and then stretched as cats do after a good meal, turned around and went back in his cave. She had it. She had that tiger's whisker right there between her fingers. She reached down and picked up that bowl and she ran home. She ran all the way home. But when she got there, it was too late to go back up to the hermit's house. So she stayed up all night holding that whisker for fear that it might drop and she would lose it. And when the first light of day came, she headed back up the hill to the hermit's hut, clutching that tiger's whisker for her life. And when she got there, she pounded on the door. Bam, bam, bam. And the hermit came, that grumpy, snarly hermit came and opened the door and said, "Oh, it's you. What do you want?" She said, I've come to bring you the key ingredient for the potion, for the elixir for the potion to cure my husband. Like you said. Come on in. Well, she walked into the room. It was just a one-room house with a pit for a fire pit in the center of the house. And it was glowing hot coals. And he said, "Let me see that." He took the whisker in his fingers and he examined it. Well, my dear, indeed, that is the whisker of a living tiger. My. I didn't know that you would be able to do that. And then he dropped it in the flames of the fire and it went. What have you done? You have no idea what I went through to get that whisker so that you could make a potion to cure my husband. What have you done? And then this gruff old guy, grizzly old guy, he put his hands on her shoulder gently and said, "My dear, you need no potion from me. No. You go back to your home and you show your husband the same patience and kindness you showed to that tiger, that you could get close enough to clip a whisker from its face. I guarantee your husband will be cured." She didn't know what to think as she left the hut and went back to her home, to her husband. what she had been through. And, you know, the days, the weeks that passed, her husband started to smile again and even laugh again and tell jokes and help out around the farm. And they were able to live very happily after that. It's the tale of the tiger's whisker from Korea. The end.
Lovely.
I know.
I'm just checking here to see if we lost.
Martha.
Martha's disappeared.
Martha's disappeared.
Yeah, she's my old friend too. I wanted to talk to her.
I know. I miss her so much.
Jeannie, I have to tell you,
You're muted.
no, I'm not. I've told that so many times,
Billy.
and you tell it so much better than I do. For your version forever. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. That's such a nice compliment. It's something that I would usually end a 3-week visit with second graders. It's really a grown-up story, but I mean, even in a classroom that was squirrely and, you know, kids nudging one another, sitting on the, they're just like,
Well, I think one
That's
of the
part of
things I like about that story is that it's so versatile. There's
mm,
so many different versions of it. You know, there's the
mm,
mother and the child. There's the grandfather and the father and the son. And so it's a lesson, but it's one that you can manage to put in so many different places.
yeah, true.
I also have always thought it's pretty timely because we do have, you know, veterans who come back from nasty places and have a hard time adjusting to the world.
Yeah.
And
true.
I'm always thinking of them while I tell that.
PTSD.
Yeah, PTSD.
PTSD. Yeah, totally.
Jeannie, that was superb.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I wasn't preparing to tell a story tonight, but
So is
except
it,
my weather.
I just have a question. We're at the Belmont Village, and there are no Belmont Village people here. Is that ordinary, or is that exceptional, or does anybody come regularly?
Or maybe they're all watching the Democratic convention.
I bet.
Yeah,
That
that's
could
true.
be.
I bet
wonder.
that's it.
And they may not have, you know, they may not be Zoomers, but if it was in a room downstairs in the facility, they would show
Yeah,
up.
I just wondered, you know, it's on every month, and I just wondered if anybody here has been to this location before. I've been here once, but twice it's in person.
Yeah, me too.
And I just wondered if
Me too.
it was just Linda and Zach, or
No, there are residents that show up.
there are. That's what I was
Oh,
asking.
yeah.
Kate Frank there.
How's she doing? Anybody here?
Who?
Kate, how's Kate doing?
Kate Frankel.
I don't know. Linda never mentions it. She just, I don't know.
It's too bad.
Terry, you got another story for us?
Always has another story.
Well, I told a story. I told a story yesterday, and this is one that probably you guys haven't heard. And I'll just do an excerpt. The story is an excerpt from a letter that I wrote to my aunt Lola. I had 4 uncles in my life, and I was very fortunate to have them. And I love each one of them dearly, and each one of them in his own way had a major influence on me as I was growing up. Not the least of which was my Uncle Neil. And I wrote a letter to his wife, Aunt Lola, the day after he passed away. And this story is part of that letter. February 4th, 1995. Dearest Lola, Yesterday, I drove from Tucson, Arizona to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Over 400 miles of nothing but barren, flat desert. The horizon only broken by renegade outcroppings of rocks and barn-sized boulders under crystal clear blue sky. With a mellow tape in the deck and a clear road ahead, it was a perfect place for reflection. And of course, my thoughts went to my Uncle Neil. Driving as I was at that moment, one memory seemed to jump ahead of all the others. It was the occasion when my uncle and I had the first opportunity to sort of bond with him as uncle and nephew. I was about 10 years old. I was very impressionable. And I got the chance to drive in his pride and joy, his new car, from Sanibel Island, Florida, to Black Mountain, North Carolina. His pride and joy was a brand new, bright green Hudson Hornet. My mother and father were in their car, and I was in the car with my Uncle Neil, and we left the island at the same time, and I worked our way through the Fort Myers traffic and headed northeast toward Jacksonville. And I watched my Uncle Neil shifting expertly through these first 3 gears. And then he did something that I hadn't seen in any other car that I'd ever been in. He shifted into another gear, fourth gear, and the engine seemed to quiet but hum, and the speed picked up, and soon we were doing 70 miles an hour on this narrow 2-lane asphalt road. I was sort of fascinated, and I got the instinctive impression that my uncle was really enjoying his inaugural drive in this car. And it was much about showing his wide-eyed nephew what a cool automobile he had, as it was pride in knowing that this was, at that time, the fastest known form of automobile transportation known to man on the planet at that time. A fact which he took great care to educate me about. And as he was talking, I was looking at all the knobs and buttons and dials and lights on the dashboard. And of course, being a sort of incorrigible, curious 10-year-old, I reached out to touch one of the knobs with the red mark on it. Stop! My uncle shouted. Don't touch that knob, ever! I pulled my hand back and I sat there chasing. I was sure that I'd almost done something horrible, maybe to ruin the engine of his prize Hudson, or send us careening off the road into these water-filled ditches on each side of the highway. I was sure those ditches were filled with gators and water moccasins. So I was very quietly sitting there feeling really bad about things. And he let me do that for a long time. And then he turned to me in a very somber and serious tone, and he said, "We don't have flight clearance from the tower. If you pull that button, you'll break the rules. We've only been cleared for road travel on this trip. And you pull that button, airfoils extend from the side of the car, and this car will elevate off the ground about 10 to 15 feet. And our speed would increase, as you can see right there, that number on the top of the speedometer, 140 miles an hour. It would go right up to 140 miles an hour. And we'd get to Black Mountain, North Carolina, long before your parents ever got out of the state of Florida." I must have looked at him somewhat dubiously, and, you know, trying to put that in my head. I'd never heard of a flying car. So he went on and he said, "You don't think I would just drive any car, do you, Terry? That I'd be content with a car just because it had the most powerful engine on the planet? Because it's the first car to have overdrive? The first car to have aerodynamic design? This isn't just an automobile, Terry. This is a Hudson Hornet. And Hornets fly, don't they?" Well, he was so impassioned and adamant in his argument that the skepticism fell away, and I went along there thinking that flying in a car was well within the reach of possibility. Now, this was a brilliant strategy on his part. Any chance of my reverting to sort of a whiny, pesky little kid saying, and when are we going to get there? And how soon are we going to be there? Just vanished. Because I just looked at that button the entire time thinking, if we could pull it, we could just lift up above all that mundane, ordinary traffic far below. So as a result, the hours and miles just flew by. Now further, a couple of years later, my Uncle Neil gave me a chance to drive that car myself around my great Aunt Lil's estate in Black Mountain. I was probably about 12, and I got in that car and my feet barely able to touch the pedals and my head just barely above the dash. I toured those many twisting gravel roads on my Aunt Lil's 80-acre property with great pride, precision, and care. My first automobile solo. And I never took it out of second gear. And even though there was never any traffic on those gravel roads, I always came to a cautious full stop at every intersection. And I know what probably you're all thinking right now. And I was sorely tempted, but I never touched that red knob. And even today, I often wonder what that red knob ever did. Thank you.
I have a suggestion,
Very
Terry.
good.
Yeah,
Get you a little red knob to put on your dash of your Prius.
yeah, it's a good suggestion. I like that. Thank you. The rest of that story goes on about him. He was quite a character, and I've got a lot of Uncle Neil stories.
I love it.
Great.
Any more?
Good one.
John doesn't have one?
No, he said he wouldn't.
I know, but I was hoping.
How about John Bow?
Oh, God. Oh, I'll tell a hod carrier
Calling
story.
on John Bow.
Okay, I'll tell a hod carrier story since that was brought up and it set me thinking. I was in a New York labor union and I worked at the building, the Bell Telephone Building in the final stages. 51st and 5th, I think it was, a big white windowless building. And we were changing the locks from the master, to the construction master to the master. The project foreman one Friday said, "Does any of you people know how to read blueprints?" And for some reason I said yes, even though I didn't know what a blueprint was. I'm a person who I always say yes to everything. So yeah. And then I went home and thought, oh shit, I don't know how to read blueprints. I'm going to be busted on Monday. So on Monday, I was sent to go with a locksmith to show him where every door was in the building from the blueprints so he could change the construction master to the permanent master. I went with the locksmith, and I confessed, I'm sorry, I don't know how to read blueprints. And the locksmith says, that's all right, kid, I know how to read blueprints. You just have this job because of the union. The union wants one of the construction workers with the locksmith just to give you an extra job. So I had several weeks just following him around, drinking beer, watching him change locks, which is goes to show it's nice to lie and pretend you know things you don't. Sometimes bullshitting gets away with it. And while he changed the locks, I do final cleaning up. Like I was cleaning up the outlets with steel wool, which is a bad idea because I stuck the steel wool into the outlet and they got the biggest shock of my life.
Dear.
But then we finished that building, and the construction company I worked for was starting a new project on down near Columbia University, 119th in Amsterdam. They didn't need many construction workers, but I needed the job. I was about to come and go to graduate school at Berkeley and give up construction, which I wasn't sure I had wanted to do. I thought it was a pretty good living and I enjoyed the work. But they said, is any of you people good at heights, like being on ledges? I again said, yeah, me. I like heights, and it's true, I do like heights. Everyone's scared of something. I'm scared of getting lost. I hate getting lost. I moved every year or two throughout my childhood, so I never knew where I was. But I love heights, and I've climbed mountains, and so I volunteered. So I worked as a rodman for the surveyor. I would climb up on a bit like the library, the Columbia University Library, and go out on the ledge, walk out the window, walk out on the ledge where you couldn't put your feet this way. You had to do it that way to fit on. I'd edge along the side, and he'd be down with his transit on the street, pointing at me, giving me hand signals, and I'd have a level, and I'd draw the line and put day glow tape next to it. So you had lines for putting up the building and from all the buildings around. This was my summer job. I was in college at the time. This was the summer after my senior year. I just gotten married. And I loved going into some professor's classroom at Columbia teaching summer classes. And I just walk in and say, excuse me, I need to use the window. And I'd open the window and go out on the ledge. The class would all be paying attention to me. No one would be looking at the professor because there was this kid who was just walking out on the ledge. And I really like heights. I still do. I like climbing on roofs, and any task like that exhilarates me. I like literally getting high. But one day I was edging along, looking for the surveyor, when I hit my head against an air conditioner that I didn't know was there. And I was on like the 14th floor, and I almost fell. I sort of wavered and caught on to the air conditioner because I hadn't noticed an air conditioning unit there. And I realized I'd have to have a plan in case I fell. Being the mature 20-year-old that I was, my plan was that if I fell, I'd try to hit the blue Chevy. I would pick a car out and try to hit my body, so at the last moment before I die, I'd think, I got it, or damn, I missed. And that, with my level of young man lack of maturity, I stayed with it and finished the job. Luckily, I never did fall, but I always had a plan for what to do in case I did.
Pick out the blue Chevy.
pick out a certain car and try to splat on it. At least I knew what I'd do in my last seconds.
Oh, no.
Glad I didn't fall.
That gives me the willies.
Else we wouldn't have
Bravo.
we wouldn't have the joy of that story. Thank you for sharing that, John.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I hadn't
That's
thought
good.
of that in a long time. Just you're mentioning hod carriers. It just brought back all these memories I haven't thought about in years.
Yeah.
That's great. That's what's
Good
nice
story.
about an evening like this, though.
Yeah, a story triggers memories of other stories, and you associate other things. That is the great pleasure of it.
Brings an interesting concept up for a storytelling Zoom get together like this. Instead of putting names in a hat, everybody put a title, a subject of a story in a hat.
Yeah.
And then pull that out and read it. And I bet you everybody in the room would come up with some kind of a little story about it or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I think so.
I like sort of triggers. There are a hat full of triggers.
Good idea. That'd be fun at Blake House. I
Yeah.
wish we could be up there. They
Oh,
are
yeah.
not open still, but the autumnal equinox is coming, and I'm thinking, oh, we should be up at Blake Gardens. Oh.
They won't even let you in now.
Mm-mm. The Berkeley Botanical, the UC Botanical Gardens in Berkeley, up Strawberry Canyon, is open.
Okay.
Oh,
But
is
you have to make a reservation to go, because they're just limiting people in the gardens. But so I thought maybe Blake Gardens would be open, but no such luck. I was I'm going to go, if I may, con su permiso, go back to weather for just a minute, because it was about this time of year that I was in Santa Fe hanging out with Lucinda Delormier, who is my birthday twin
Oh,
and was my first storytelling teacher, and we have been friends ever since. I was taking an encaustic a workshop in Santa Fe, and I was able to stay with her, which was great. And one night there was a horrific storm, a huge storm, thunder and lightning. It was, well, that happens in the desert. You get these great storms and lots of thunder and lightning. And the lightning and the thunder would come simultaneously, which means it's right on top of you. And we managed to live through that experience. But the next day, or the next evening, she was hosting a little story circle that she's putting together, getting storytellers together in Santa Fe. There's a pretty active group in Albuquerque, but not so much in Santa Fe, interestingly. So that's kind of her thing, is to bring storytellers together. And this one woman, we were talking about the weather the night before and the storm and the blah, blah, blah. And this one woman who was a fourth generation Santa Fean told that night, a ball of lightning came into her bedroom. She was in bed and the ball of lightning came into her bedroom and kind of landed right at the foot of her feet, with like 2 feet from her feet, and then just disappeared. And I'm going, what? And then all these stories from the people that live there about this ball lightning. And in the pictures of the lightning that was on television last night, they showed something that was purportedly ball lightning, and or little round circles that going all over the sky. Did anybody see anything like that? Well, then the stories started coming out about experiences with ball lightning, and somebody was in their kitchen and the ball of lightning came in and went around the kitchen, zoom, 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 and then disappeared. And they've had recordings of ball lightning going up the old Santa Fe Trail. So last night on the news, to see that ball lightning has come to the Bay Area is a little bit spooky. But have you ever heard of ball lightning?
No.
Google it. It's fascinating.
Now, what is the birthday you share with Lucinda?
October 15th.
October 15th. Excellent.
Uh-huh.
Now, what? There's a Spanish. I think it's from Mexico. Word for people with the same name, tocayo. Like John and I are tocayos because we're both Johns. And I have a friend who's born who taught me the word tocayo, who's on January 26th, as I am, and we call each other birthday tocayos. So we have
Oh,
this idea of the same name, that the same birthday. We're kind of tocayos. You have a special bond if you have the same birthday.
oh, that's interesting. I like that. Well, we've been birthday twins for decades, so I doubt we're going to change it.
Do any of you other people have birthday twins? Birthday tocayos?
No, I almost do.
Uh-huh.
My youngest brother is 7 years younger than I am by 1 day.
By 1 day, okay. Close.
Almost a Tocayo.
I told my mother if she just pushed a little harder with me, she could have combined us both together at the same time. I had just a quick story. When my oldest son, Chris, passed away, we had a memorial for him in Washington, D.C. at this very big church. And the place was crammed because people came from all over to be at his memorial. Even people flew in from other countries to be there. And I was sitting down front. And one of the people who was doing a eulogy talked about Chris, and every time you saw him, this feeling you got from him, this energy and this great eagerness to be with him and spend time with him. And as he was saying that, all of a sudden I saw this big flash of light going off in the church. It was huge. And I thought to myself, that's strange. I wonder, that's unusual for the press to be here with flash bulbs going off in the middle of a memorial service. But I passed, I got to let it go until the reception, when a lot of people came up to me and said, did you see the lightning on the roof of the church? And I said, no. And he said, just when Jeff made that mention of seeing Chris for the first time, this arc of lightning kind of went all the way from the back of the church right up over the where the altar was, and just burst and left. And everybody said, it's just like Chris to crash his own memorial service.
I love it.
Wow.
That's just great.
That's amazing.
I had an experience similar when my mother died unexpectedly in routine surgery. And we heard from it out here, and it was a Sunday. We were all depressed, and but my youngest daughter, she must have been 10 at the time, and my wife, she and myself and my daughter were hungry, so we wanted to go somewhere to get something to eat. My wife didn't want any food. When we came back, all our electricity was off. Every other house in the block had electricity. We didn't have any. So we went upstairs to the bedroom. It was Sunday, which was when my mother usually called every Sunday. So we had candles and sat in bed just feeling sad as it got dark, and suddenly the phone rang. And I picked up the phone, and there was no one there, but then all the lights went on. And it was the same thing. I thought it was like it was Chris. I thought this was my mother saying goodbye. The same meaningful coincidence.
Right.
Really fantastic. Yeah.
Strange.
No telling what those dead people will do.
Exactly. Yeah, no telling. Exactly. Yeah, they're still messing around. Yeah.
Right.
So,
18 after.
yeah, I think so.
This time.
Yeah.
We could say, we'll watch the convention.
So have we come to the end of the rodeo?
Well, it's been great fun. I've loved it. I love hearing all your stories.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us and sharing your stories. Really, really wonderful.
Thank you, Jeannie, for emceeing for us.
Thank you, Jeannie.
And John.
Yeah.
Thank you.
John, yeah. absolutely.
Thank you all. Yeah.
Hey, Karen. Karen, you feeling better?
Pardon?
Karen Werner, feeling better?
Yeah,
A sore throat or something. You okay?
yeah, fine.
Good.
Sam's okay.
I'm fine.
Yeah, we're still here.
Tough old bird.
Yeah.
I had a sore throat for weeks, literally. And I don't know why, but because of tonight, I started gargling and taking medication, and I think it helped a bit, but it's still very croaky. So
You did great, Karen.
Sound good. Yeah.
it's good to see you all. So
Good
good
to see you
night.
all.
Okay.
Good night.
Be well. Stay safe.
I look forward to hearing a story from you next time.
John Cupping.
Yeah. Yes, I'll plan one.
Be sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
That-
Yeah.
I was glad to hear so many wonderful stories. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Jean.
That's right.
Thank you, John. See you in the neighborhood.
Yep.
Okay.